He grabbed my wrist like I was something he owned. Not gently. Not even in the careless way people grab things by accident. He grabbed it the way Marcus always grabbed things, with full intention, with the kind of grip that says I decide when you move and when you don't. We were in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel. Chandeliers above us. Marble floors beneath us. $200 worth of flowers on the front desk that nobody was looking at because everyone was looking at us instead. Elijah went still. That's the thing people don't understand about children who grow up in houses like ours. They don't cry when it starts. They don't run. They go completely, perfectly still, like small animals who have learned that stillness is the only safe thing left to be. My 7-year-old son stood beside me with his little hands at his sides and his eyes on the floor, and something inside my chest cracked open at the sight of him. Not here, I was thinking. Please, Marcus. Not in front of all these people. Not in front of Eli. I could feel the stares. I could feel the way the lobby had gotten quieter. Not silent, just quieter. The way rooms do when people sense something wrong but don't want to be the one to step into it. A woman near the elevator looked at me, then looked away. A man in a gray coat suddenly became very interested in his phone. Nobody moved. They never do. Marcus was saying something low and tight into my ear. I had stopped hearing his actual words years ago. I heard the tone, controlled, cold, meant to remind me of my place, and I felt the pressure of his hand around my wrist, and I thought, this is my life. This is just my life now. That's when I heard it. A glass being set down. Not slammed. Not dropped. Set down. The sound was small and deliberate, like a single word spoken clearly in a noisy room. Like a period at the end of a sentence. Like a decision being made. I didn't know where it came from at first. I just felt the shift. Something in the air of the lobby changed, the way the air changes right before a storm, when everything gets very quiet and very still, and you know without knowing that something is about to happen. Then I saw him stand up. He was across the lobby, maybe 30 feet away, near a private lounge area that I hadn't even noticed when we walked in. Tall. Dressed in a dark suit that fit like it had been made specifically for his shoulders, which it probably had. He had a calm face, not relaxed, not friendly, just calm, the kind of calm that doesn't come from having nothing to worry about. It comes from not being afraid of anything. He buttoned the top button of his jacket. He started walking toward us. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know anything about him. I only knew that when he crossed that lobby, something in Marcus's grip changed, just slightly, just enough, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I thought, someone sees me. He didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed. Every man I had ever known who wanted to look powerful moved fast, talked loud, took up space on purpose. Marcus did it all the time, walked into rooms like he was daring someone to say something. But this man crossed the lobby slowly, like he had already decided how everything was going to end, and there was simply no reason to hurry. Marcus felt it before he saw it. I know because his grip on my wrist shifted. Still tight, but different. The way a person holds something when they suddenly remember it could be taken from them. He turned around. The man stopped about 4 feet away. Not close enough to be aggressive. Close enough to be absolutely clear. He looked at Marcus the way you look at something you have already made a decision about. No anger in his face. No performance. Just a kind of quiet attention that was somehow worse than anything loud could have been. Let go of her wrist. That was all he said. 3 words, low and even, the kind of voice that has never once needed to repeat itself. Marcus laughed. I knew that laugh. It was the one he used when he felt cornered but didn't want to show it. Excuse me? This is my wife. Who are you? The man didn't answer. He just looked at Marcus and waited. I felt Marcus's hand loosen. I don't think he even realized he'd done it. His body responded to something his pride hadn't caught up to yet. Then a second man appeared. He stepped in from the left, quiet as a shadow, broad-shouldered, with a kind of stillness that made the first man's stillness look casual. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, one step behind and to the side, and the message was so clear it didn't need language. Marcus let go of my wrist. He stepped back and straightened his jacket and did the thing he always did when he lost control of a situation. He smiled. Wide and easy, like nothing had happened. Like we were all just having a pleasant evening. I don't know what you think you saw. I know exactly what I saw. The man's voice hadn't changed at all. My security team will be calling the police in approximately 2 minutes. There is a formal incident report already being prepared at the front desk. I'd suggest you think carefully about what you'd like to say next. Marcus's smile didn't fall all at once. It faded slowly, the way light fades at the end of the day. He looked at me, that look, the one that said we'll finish this later. And then he walked toward the hotel bar without another word, like the whole thing had been his idea. I stood there. My wrist was throbbing. Eli was pressed against my side, his small head tucked under my arm, and I realized I was shaking. The man turned to me. Up close, his eyes were dark and steady and completely unreadable. Are you hurt? I almost said I'm fine. I had said those 2 words so many times they had stopped meaning anything. But something about the way he asked, direct, quiet, like he actually wanted the truth, made the words catch in my throat. I don't know, I said instead. He nodded slowly, like that was the most honest answer he'd heard in a long time. My name is Seo Jinho, he said. This is my hotel. He didn't leave us standing there. That was what surprised me most. Men like the ones Marcus knew, wealthy, important, used to being listened to, they made gestures. They did the visible thing, and then they moved on, back to their drinks and their conversations and their comfortable lives. They didn't stay.
Gino stayed.
He spoke quietly to the broad-shouldered man beside him. Taeyong, I would later learn. And then he turned back to us and said, come with me, in that same even voice, and somehow my feet just followed him. He led us to a small sitting area near the hotel entrance, away from the lobby and the stairs and the sound of Marcus ordering his first drink at the bar. It was quieter there. A low couch, warm lighting, a window that looked out onto the street where normal people were walking by in the cold, living their normal lives. Eli hadn't said a single word. Jinho looked down at him. Something in his face shifted, not softer exactly, but different. More careful. Do you like hot chocolate? He asked. Eli looked up at me first, checking, the way he always did before he allowed himself to want anything. I nodded. He looked back at Jinho and said quietly, yes, sir. Jinho signaled someone without even turning his head, the way people do when they are so used to being in charge that giving instructions has become like breathing. Within 4 minutes, a hotel staff member appeared with a proper mug of hot chocolate and a small plate of cookies, and set them on the table in front of Eli like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eli looked at the mug. Then he looked up at Jinho with something close to wonder. I had to press my lips together to keep myself steady. When the staff member left, Jinho reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and held out a card.
Plain.
Cream-colored. Expensive feeling between my fingers when I took it. His name was printed in clean letters, Seo Jinho, and below it a phone number. Nothing else. No title. No company name. If he puts his hands on you again, he said simply. I stared at the card. I didn't know what to say. Thank you felt too small. And something about the way he was looking at me made it hard to find any words at all, not because he made me nervous, but because he was looking at me like I was a full person. Like what had happened to me in that lobby actually mattered. I couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at me that way. His car arrived before I could pull myself together enough to say anything meaningful. He walked us to the entrance, waited while Eli finished the last of his hot chocolate, and then stood at the door as we left. That night, after Eli was asleep and Marcus was in the bedroom making calls and pretending the evening had gone perfectly fine, I sat at the kitchen table alone. I set the card under the small lamp by the fruit bowl. I looked at it for a long time. Just his name. Just a number. And 8 words that nobody had ever said to me before. If he puts his hands on you again. Like it wasn't supposed to happen. Like it wasn't just something I was supposed to accept. I left the card under the lamp and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I didn't plan to go to my mother's house the next morning. I told myself I was just taking Eli for a walk. Then I told myself we were just getting breakfast somewhere. But my feet kept moving in the direction they always moved when things got bad enough, and 20 minutes later, I was standing on Diane Reeves' front porch with Eli's hand in mine, and a bruise on my wrist that I had covered with the wide beaded bracelet Marcus had bought me for my birthday 2 years ago. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She looked at me the way mothers look at their children when they already know. Not surprised. Not panicked. Just that quiet, heavy look that said she had been waiting for this morning for a long time. "Eli, baby," she said, her voice bright and easy. The voice she saved specifically for her grandson. "Your cartoons are already on, and there are biscuits on the stove. Go on." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He slipped past her into the warmth of the house and disappeared around the corner, and just like that it was only the two of us. Diane stepped back to let me in. She didn't hug me right away. She didn't ask questions or say anything at all. She just walked to the kitchen and put the kettle on, and I sat down at her table, the same table I had done homework at as a girl, the same table where she had helped me fill out college applications, and I pressed my hands flat against the surface and tried to breathe. She set a mug in front of me, sat down across from me, waited. "It's getting worse," I said. That was all I could manage at first. She nodded. "Mama, I know you've known. I know you've been." My voice broke a little. "I know you didn't say anything, because you were scared I'd pull away." "I was," she said simply. "No shame in it. Just truth." I reached into my jacket pocket and put Jinho's card on the table between us. I told her what happened at the hotel. All of it. Marcus's hand on my wrist, Eli going still, the sound of the glass, the man who crossed the lobby like he had already decided. I told her about the hot chocolate and the card and the 8 words. Diane listened without interrupting, which was how I knew she understood it was serious. When I finished, she picked up the card, looked at the name. Then she reached for her phone and typed it into the search bar, and I watched her face as the results loaded.
She was quiet for a long time.
"Camille."
Her voice had changed. "Careful now."
"The way you get careful around something that could go either way." "I know, Mama." She looked up from the phone. "Do you?" I wrapped both hands around my mug. The coffee was too hot, but I held it anyway because I needed something solid to hold on to. "He didn't have to stay," I said quietly. "He didn't have to crouch down and ask Eli about hot chocolate. He didn't have to give me that card. He could have just walked back to his booth and finished his drink." Diane set the phone down. She looked at me for a long moment with those steady brown eyes that had never once let me get away with fooling myself. "No," she finally said. "He didn't have to." She reached across the table and covered my bracelet and the bruise underneath it with her hand.
"So, what do you need?" she asked.
"Right now. What do you need?" I looked at my mother's hand over mine. I looked at Jinho's card still sitting on the table between us. For the first time in years, I didn't say I'm fine. 3 days passed. I moved through them carefully, the way you move through a house in the dark, slow, quiet, hands out, trying not to knock anything over. Marcus was in one of his calm periods. That was almost harder than the other kind. When he was calm, he was charming and easy, and he made coffee in the mornings and asked about Eli's homework, and if you didn't know what lived underneath all that warmth, you might actually believe it was real. I knew what lived underneath it. I kept Jinho's card in the inside pocket of my everyday bag. Not somewhere Marcus would find it if he went through my things, which he did sometimes. Just tucked inside a small zip pocket where I could feel it was there without having to look at it. On the 3rd morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I had gotten careful about unknown numbers ever since Marcus's friends started calling to report back to him on places they'd seen me. But something made me pick up. The woman on the other end was professional and calm. She introduced herself simply as someone calling on behalf of Mr. Seo. She wanted to confirm that I and my son were safe and that there had been no further incidents following the evening at the Meridian. I was standing in the kitchen. Marcus was in the shower. Eli was eating cereal at the table, kicking his feet slowly against the chair legs the way he always did when he was thinking about something. "We're fine," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "Mr. Seo is glad to hear it," the woman said pleasantly. "Please don't hesitate to use the number on the card." She hung up before I could say anything else. I stood there holding the phone and staring at the wall for a moment. Then Eli asked me if there was more orange juice, and I came back to myself and said yes and got the carton from the fridge and poured it and kept moving. That evening, after dinner, after Eli's bath, After Marcus left for what he called a work call that lasted 2 hours behind a closed door, my phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. I read it standing in the hallway outside Eli's bedroom, his nightlight glowing soft and orange under the door. You don't have to be fine. You just have to be safe. Are you safe? I read it 3 times. There was something about the way it was written that undid me a little. Not are you okay, which was what people asked when they wanted a quick answer they didn't have to do anything with. Not how are you, which had stopped meaning anything years ago. Just that one straight, honest question. Are you safe? I stood in the hallway for 20 minutes. I watched the orange glow under Eli's door. I listened to Marcus's voice behind the closed door at the other end of the hall, low and confident, talking to someone about something that had nothing to do with us. Then I typed back.
For now.
I watched the screen. The reply came in less than a minute. That's not good enough. But it's a start. I pressed the phone against my chest and closed my eyes. Nobody had ever told me that for now wasn't good enough. Every person in my life had learned to accept for now because I gave them no other choice. I had made my peace with for now so completely that I had stopped believing anything else existed. But he said it like something better was not only possible. He said it like something better was simply a matter of time. I put the phone in my pocket and went to check on Eli. But for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep thinking about something other than how to get through tomorrow. Saturday mornings were the ones I saved. Marcus golfed every Saturday. He left by 7:30, which meant that from 7:30 until roughly 1 in the afternoon, the apartment belonged to me and Eli. We didn't do anything special during those hours. We just existed without being careful. Eli talked at normal volume. I laughed without checking first to see if it would bother anyone. We ate breakfast slowly and left the dishes in the sink for a little while, and it felt, during those few hours, like being able to take a full breath after holding it all week. That Saturday, I took Eli to Carver Park, about 6 blocks from our building. The trees were still holding the last of their color, deep orange and tired yellow, and the path around the pond was mostly empty that early. Eli ran ahead the way he always did, his small sneakers slapping against the pavement, and I walked behind him with my hands in my coat pockets and let myself pretend, just for a little while, that this was simply what our life looked like. I saw Jinho before Eli did. He was standing near the pond, looking out at the water with his hands behind his back. No suit this time. Dark coat, simple clothes, but there was no version of this man that would let him disappear into a background. Taeyong was visible further up the path, far enough to give space, close enough to matter. I stopped walking. Jinho turned, as if he had heard me stop, which he couldn't have. He looked at me without surprise. He nodded once, the way people nod when something they expected has arrived. Later, I would think about that nod. I would think about the fact that he happened to be at the same park on the same morning in the same city of 8 million people.
I didn't ask him about it that day.
I wasn't ready to know the answer. Eli had already spotted the ducks near the bank and reversed direction completely, running back toward me. Mama, can we feed them? Do we have anything? Jinho reached into his coat pocket and produced a small paper bag. Crackers, he said simply, holding it out to Eli. They prefer them to bread. Eli looked at the bag, looked at me. I nodded. He took the bag with both hands and said a very serious thank you and turned back toward the pond like a boy with an important job to do. I stood beside Jinho, and we watched my son crouch at the water's edge and begin distributing crackers with great concentration and fairness, making sure no single duck was left out. He's careful, Jinho said quietly. He's always been like that, I said. Even when he was really small, he noticed everything. Jinho was quiet for a moment. Children who grow up in loud houses learn to notice everything. It keeps them safe. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say to that because it was exactly true, and we both knew it. We walked the path slowly while Eli ran ahead and doubled back and ran ahead again the way children do when they have energy and space and nobody telling them to be still. At some point, Eli slipped his hand into Jinho's without asking, without even looking up. Just reached out and grabbed 2 of his fingers the way small children grab onto things they've decided to trust. I looked away. I looked at the trees and the gray sky and the ducks settling back onto the water, and I pressed my lips together and did not cry, but it was close. On the walk back to the car, Jinho fell into step beside me while Eli skipped ahead. "He's not okay," he said quietly. Not unkindly. Just clearly. "Neither are you. And you both deserve better than okay." I kept my eyes forward. "I know," I said. And for the first time I actually meant it. Marcus found out on a Tuesday. I don't know exactly who told him. Someone at the hotel, maybe. Someone who recognized him from the charity circuit and saw enough of what happened in the lobby to piece the rest together. Marcus had connections everywhere. That was something he had always been proud of. He knew people who knew people, and information had a way of finding him. He came home from work earlier than usual. I heard the front door and felt the change immediately, the way you feel weather before it arrives. Something in the quality of the silence that followed. The particular way his keys landed on the table by the door, not dropped, placed, which was always worse. Eli was in his room doing homework. I was grateful for that. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was still in his work clothes, jacket on, and he was looking at me with the cold version of his face. Not the loud version. The cold one, measured and deliberate, the one he used when he wanted me to understand that he was completely in control of himself and therefore completely in control of whatever happened next. That version had always scared me more than the shouting. "You want to tell me about the man at the hotel?" he said. My hands were still. I had learned a long time ago not to let my hands move when he looked at me like that. "Someone helped us," I said. "You were hurting my wrist in public, Marcus." He smiled. Thin and without warmth. "Helped you." He repeated the words like they tasted strange. "Do you know who that man is? Do you know what he's involved in? He stopped you from..." "I'm going to need you to listen to me very carefully." His voice dropped lower, which meant we had arrived at the part where he wanted me to be afraid. "I don't know what you think is happening here, but I want you to understand something. If you embarrass this family, if you go looking for some kind of rescue from a man like that, I will make things very difficult for you. Eli's school schedule. Your name on this lease. The joint accounts you use every single time you buy groceries." He let that sit in the air between us. "You don't have anything that isn't mine," he said quietly. "Remember that." He walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the bedroom door close. I stood at the counter until I was sure my legs would hold me. Then I went and checked on Eli, who was still at his desk, pencil moving across a worksheet, completely absorbed. I stood in his doorway for a moment just watching him. Then I went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet so the sound would cover me, and called Jinho. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything. The thin smile, the specific threats, the way Marcus had listed the things he could take like he was reading from a prepared document. I kept my voice low and steady, and when I finished there was a short silence on the other end. "He's not fighting to keep you," Jinho said. His voice was even and quiet. "He's fighting to keep control. There's a difference." I leaned against the bathroom wall. "And you already know which one it is," he added. I closed my eyes. I did know.
I had known for a long time.
Knowing had never been the problem. The problem was that knowing something and being able to move because of it were two completely different things, and Marcus had spent years making sure the distance between them felt impossible to cross. "Yes," I said. "I know." "Then hold on to that," Jinho said. "Just that for now." I stayed in the bathroom for another few minutes after we hung up. Then I dried my hands, opened the door, and went to help Eli finish his homework. He chose a restaurant I had never heard of. Small, tucked between two larger buildings on a quiet street downtown, with no sign outside except a single word etched into the frosted glass of the door. The kind of place that didn't need to advertise because everyone who was meant to find it already knew where it was. Jinho was already there when I arrived. He stood when he saw me come in, which was such a simple thing, such a basic courtesy, and yet I had to remind myself not to react to it. Marcus had stopped standing when I entered rooms years ago. We sat across from each other at a corner table. Taeyong took a seat near the entrance, far enough away to be invisible, close enough to be present. I had started to understand that Taeyong was less a person and more a permanent condition of Jinho's life. We ordered. For a little while we talked about easy things. Eli's latest obsession, which was volcanoes. A new interior design exhibit I had read about but couldn't afford to attend. The food, which was quiet and excellent. Then I set my fork down and looked at him directly. "Tell me who you actually are," I said. He didn't look away. He didn't smile or deflect or make it into something smaller than it was. He just looked back at me with those steady dark eyes and seemed to make a decision. He told me about the organization, not every detail, not names or specifics, but enough. Import businesses that were really about moving other things. Arrangements with people in positions of power that kept certain operations running smoothly. Lawyers who had never lost a case because losing was never something Jinho was willing to accept. He described it plainly, without pride and without apology, the way you describe the weather. This is what exists. This is what it is. He told me about his younger brother, Jaewon. Jaewon had wanted out of the organization. He was 26 and had a girlfriend he wanted to marry and a small apartment he was proud of, and he made the mistake of trying to leave without the right permissions from the right people. Jinho had been trying to arrange those permissions when it happened. A territorial dispute that had nothing to do with Jaewon directly and everything to do with the world he had been born into. Jinho stopped talking for a moment. He looked at his glass. "I got the call on a Thursday afternoon," he said. "I have spent every Thursday since then wondering what I could have done differently." The restaurant was quiet around us. Soft sounds, distant and unimportant. "I'm sorry," I said. "And I meant it the way you mean it when words feel completely useless, but you say them anyway because silence would be worse." He nodded once. Then he looked up at me. "After Jaewon, I became very good at protecting the organization," he said. "Assets, territory, money. I am very skilled at protecting things that don't actually need me." He paused. "I am tired of only protecting interests. I would like to protect something that matters." The words landed quietly. He didn't look away when he said them, and I didn't look away either, and the air between us felt suddenly very still.
I didn't know what to say.
I was a woman sitting across from a man who had just described a life built on power and danger and real darkness, and I believed every word, and I was not afraid, and I didn't fully understand that yet. So I said nothing. I just held his gaze and let the silence sit between us, and somehow that was the right thing, because something in his face eased slightly, like a door that had been held shut for a long time finally being allowed to rest. We finished our meal. He walked me to my car. The afternoon was cold and gray, and completely ordinary around us. "Same time next week?" he asked. I looked at him for a moment. "Yes," I said. I always knew it would get worse before it got better. That was something Diane had said to me once, early on, when I had first let her see enough of the truth to understand what our life actually looked like behind the door of that apartment. I had filed it away without fully believing it, the way you file away advice that makes sense in theory but feels impossible to apply to your own specific, complicated, real life. I understood it now. Marcus came home late on a Thursday night. I heard him at the door and checked the clock, past midnight, and felt my whole body go carefully still under the covers. I had learned to read his arrivals the way sailors read water. The sound of his keys, the weight of his footsteps, the particular way he moved through the dark apartment. All of it information. All of it telling me what the next few hours were going to look like. That night the information was bad. I won't describe everything. Some things you carry quietly because putting them into words gives them a shape that's too heavy to hold. What I will say is that it was the worst it had ever been, and at some point I heard Eli's door open in the hallway, and that, the thought of my son standing in the dark watching, was what moved me. I got Eli back to his room. I told him everything was okay in the voice I kept specifically for him, the calm one, the one that had never once reflected what was actually happening inside me. I tucked him back in and sat on the edge of his bed until his breathing evened out. Then I went to the bathroom and locked the door and sat on the cold tile floor. It was just past 1 a.m. I called Jinho. He answered before the second ring finished. No hello, no sound of someone woken from sleep and disoriented. Just his voice, clear and immediate, like he had simply been waiting. "Camille." I told him where I was. I told him enough. My voice stayed level because I had used up all my falling apart for the night, and there was nothing left but this strange hollow calm that comes after. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. "Stay in that room," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone except Eli. I'm handling it." 12 minutes later, I heard a knock at the front door. I heard Marcus answer it. Irritated, loud, then suddenly not loud at all. Then I heard voices. Low, unhurried, completely polite. I couldn't make out the exact words, but I understood the shape of them. The calm that is more frightening than any raised voice because it comes from people who have absolutely nothing to prove. Marcus did not make another sound that night. In the morning, I came out of the bathroom and moved through the apartment quietly and efficiently. I packed a bag for Eli, enough for several days. I packed one for myself. I woke Eli gently and told him we were going to Grandma Diane's for a little while, and he looked at me with those serious eyes that saw everything and said, "Okay, Mama," and got up without argument. We stepped into the hallway. Taeyong was standing near the elevator with another man I didn't recognize. He looked at me and gave a single small nod, not dramatic, not loaded with meaning. Just an acknowledgement. "You're seen. You're safe. You can move." I took Eli's hand. We walked to the elevator, and I pressed the button and watched the numbers change above the door and did not look back at the apartment. I didn't know it yet with complete certainty, standing there in that hallway with my son's hand in mine and one bag over my shoulder. But I did not go back. Diane ironed my blouse the morning of the hearing. She didn't ask if I wanted her to. She just took it from where I had laid it across the chair the night before and set up the ironing board in the spare bedroom and pressed every crease out of it slowly and carefully, the way she had ironed my school uniforms when I was small. I stood in the doorway watching her and felt something move through my chest that I didn't have a clean word for. I had practiced my statement 4 times at her kitchen table. The first time I couldn't get through it. I stopped halfway and pressed my hands flat on the table and breathed until the feeling passed. The second time was better. The third time my voice stayed level all the way to the end. By the fourth time, Diane had stopped watching me with worry and started watching me with something closer to pride, which was harder to look at but easier to carry. Jin Ho called the night before. He told me he wouldn't be at the courthouse. He said it simply, without waiting for me to ask, because he already understood the question I hadn't formed yet. His presence would give Marcus's lawyers exactly the weapon they were looking for, a dangerous outside influence, a reason to reframe everything, a way to make the story about Jinho instead of about me and Eli and the years of what Marcus had done inside our home. "You don't need me there," he said. "You have everything you need already." I wasn't sure I believed him, but I wrote it down on a small piece of paper and put it in my coat pocket anyway. The courtroom was cold and formal and smelled like old paper. I sat at the front beside the prosecutor, my hands folded in my lap, my back straight. Diane sat directly behind me. I could feel her there without turning around, solid and steady, like something I could lean against if I needed to. Taeyong was 3 rows back. I only saw him once, when I came in. He didn't nod or signal anything. He just sat there with his hands resting on his knees, quiet as furniture, watching the room the way he always watched rooms. When they brought Marcus and he looked sharp and composed in a gray suit his lawyer had probably chosen. He scanned the room quickly, and I saw the exact moment he registered Taeyong's presence. Something moved behind his eyes. Something he swallowed back down immediately. Good. His lawyer spoke first. Painted Marcus as a man under pressure, a provider, a father who had made regrettable mistakes but who loved his family. Used words like complex and emotional and miscommunication until I wanted to press my palms over my ears. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front on steady legs, which surprised me. I stood at the small podium and looked down at my statement and then looked up and did not look at Marcus at all. I spoke to the room. I described the lobby of the Meridian Hotel and what Marcus's hand on my wrist had felt like in front of our son. I described the night Eli stood in the dark hallway. I described 7 years of careful, quiet damage, the kind that doesn't always leave marks you can photograph, but leaves marks nonetheless. My voice broke once. When I talked about Eli's face in the hallway, I stopped, took one breath, continued. When I sat back down, I felt Diane's hand on my shoulder, brief and firm, and I covered it with my own for just a moment. The judge did not take long. Protective order granted. Full primary custody to Camille Reeves. Supervised visitation for Marcus to be reviewed after 6 months. She said other things too, but I stopped fully hearing them after custody because the word landed in my chest and stayed there, warm and solid and real. Outside in the hallway, Eli came running from where he'd been waiting with Diane's neighbor. He crashed into me with his full small body, and I caught him and held on and buried my face in his hair and just breathed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I read the text one-handed, still holding Eli. It's done. I had sent Jean Ho from inside the courtroom the moment the judge finished. His reply was already there waiting. I know. I've been waiting. I held the phone against my son's back and closed my eyes. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon light was thin and pale and absolutely beautiful. 2 months later, I bought Eli a plant. It was a small thing. A little potted succulent from the grocery store, $3.99, sitting in a terracotta pot no bigger than my fist. Eli named it Gerald within approximately 4 minutes of getting it home and gave it a spot on his windowsill, with great ceremony. But the reason I'm telling you about the plant is because of what it meant that I bought it at all. You don't buy plants when you're just surviving. You buy plants when some quiet part of you has started to believe you'll be somewhere long enough to watch something grow. The new apartment was on the 4th floor of a building on a tree-lined street in a neighborhood I had chosen entirely by myself. 3 bedrooms. A kitchen with a window that got morning light. A small balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a table, which Eli had immediately claimed as his reading spot and which I had gently reclaimed for adult use after 8:30 on school nights. The building had excellent security. New cameras, a recently upgraded entrance system, a management team that responded to maintenance requests within 24 hours. I had noticed all of this when I came to view the apartment and thought what a remarkable coincidence it was. And then I had thought about Jean Ho and decided not to examine the coincidence too carefully. I was 3 weeks into my interior design certification course. The work was harder than I expected and more absorbing than I had hoped, which meant that some evenings I sat at the kitchen table with my course materials spread around me and forgot, for whole stretches of an hour, to be afraid of anything. That was new. Eli was in therapy on Wednesday afternoons with a woman named Dr. Osei, who had a cactus collection, and let him pick which chair to sit in, which he considered extremely important. He was sleeping through the night. He had made a best friend at his new school named Cooper, who came over on Fridays and ate everything in the refrigerator. He had started laughing the way children are supposed to laugh, sudden and full and completely unguarded. I was still getting used to the sound of it. Jean Ho came to dinner on a Saturday in November. It was the first time he had been to the apartment. He arrived exactly on time, which I had expected, carrying food from a Korean restaurant Eli had decided was his favorite, which I had not expected but probably should have. Diane was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on, pretending to look at a magazine but actually watching the door. When Jean Ho walked in, she looked at him for a long moment over her glasses. He looked back at her with complete respect and said, "Mrs. Reeves. Thank you for letting me come." Diane considered this. "You brought enough food?" she asked. "Enough for twice as many people," he said. She nodded once, satisfied, and went back to her magazine. That was as close to an official welcome as Diane Reeves gave anyone, and everyone at the table understood it. Eli beat Jean Ho at cards 3 times. Jean Ho lost with such commitment and such genuine seeming frustration that I had to press my lips together to keep from smiling. After the 3rd loss, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Eli with great seriousness and said, "You are either very skilled or very lucky." And Eli said, "Both," with complete confidence, and Diane laughed out loud at that. After Eli was in bed and Diane had gathered her things and kissed my cheek and given Jean Ho a look on her way out that contained an entire conversation, Jean Ho and I sat on the balcony. It was cold. I had brought out 2 mugs of tea and a blanket that I had wrapped around my shoulders, and the city moved quietly below us, and for a while neither of us said anything at all. "What do you want?" I asked eventually. "Not from me. Just in general. From your life." He held his mug in both hands and looked out at the lights below and was quiet for long enough that I thought he might not answer. This, he said finally. Just that one word. I looked at him. He looked back at me, steady and unhurried, and the city hummed around us, and Gerald the succulent was visible through the window on Eli's windowsill, and somewhere down the hall my son was sleeping deeply and safely through the night. I reached over and put my hand over his. Neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. Some things don't need to be spoken to be completely, permanently true. I was not a woman who had been rescued. I was a woman who had made a series of very hard decisions and walked through very dark places and come out the other side into something I had almost stopped believing in. A life that was actually mine. And I had let someone stand beside me while I built it, not in front of me, not pulling me forward, just beside me. And for a woman who had spent years being told she was nothing, that turned out to be everything.